Hey beauties, it's story time. And as usual, let's take a moment to relax and take care of ourselves. I know today might have been rough for you guys, so let's just wind down together. I want you to grab your tea, get cozy, and let me tell you another spooky story. Today, we're going to talk about a game. Have you ever played hide and seek? Fun, right? When you're a kid. But what if you played alone? In Japan, there's a ritual called Hitori Kakurenbo, which translates to hide and seek alone. And they say once you start this game, you're not playing by yourself anymore. You're playing with something else. So tonight, I'm going to share a terrifying story of one girl who actually tried it and barely made it out alive. Let's begin. Hitori Kakurenbo, again, in English means hide and seek alone, which is already creepy, right? On the surface, it looks like a silly little game. But the deeper you go, the more it feels like a curse. So this weird ritual first surfaced online in the early 2000s on Japanese forums like 2chan, where people swapped ghost stories. But it didn't come out of nowhere. Its ingredients are stitched together from centuries of Japanese folklore. And that's what makes it terrifying, because every part of it means something. So this game begins with a doll. And in Japan, dolls aren't just toys. They're seen as yorishiro, vessels that can attract or even house spirits. You cut the doll open, pull out its cotton stuffing, and replace it with rice. And rice here isn't random. It represents flesh, the living body. So this ingredient makes the doll more human and more appetizing to whatever might want to enter it. And then comes the part that kind of makes your skin crawl. You have to put a piece of yourself inside the doll. For example, like a clipping from your nails, a strand of your hair. And that is the tether. That is the moment the doll stops being just a vessel and becomes another version of you. And after putting that all inside, you have to stitch it back up with red thread. And red isn't chosen by accident. It represents blood vessels, binding, sealing. So it's almost like you're locking something alive inside the doll. And you don't cut the thread. You have to wrap the leftover string around the doll, as if you've tied its body closed. And at exactly 3 a.m., the hour when the veil between our world and the other is paper thin, the game begins. The doll is submerged in water because water is seen as a bridge between realms. And the TV is left on static, which is seen as a kind of window, a sensor for the presence that's about to come. And you have to whisper 3 times, "The first seeker is me." From there, the rules sound simple. Hide, keep the salt water in your mouth to protect yourself, and when you're ready to end it, you have to spit that water onto the doll. Salt has always been sacred in Japan, used to purify shrines, graves, and even sumo rings. So that salt is the one defense you have to drive the spirit out, if you can make it that far. But people who've tried say it never stays simple. At first, it feels like a thrill, a dare, but then the house changes. Static deepens into whispers, the television laughs, heavy footsteps echo down empty halls, and the doll, the one you left behind, it's not where you put it anymore, like it's alive. Some people say they've seen it move. Others claim they've heard some kind of a voice, a low breath against their ear, whispering their name. And tonight, I'm going to tell you about one girl who actually tried this game. Her name was Aya. She was just a normal college student until one night when she stumbled across this ritual online. And from that moment on, her life was never the same. So Aya lived quite an ordinary life, classes during the day, part-time job in the evenings, and her phone glued to her hand at night. So one late night, scrolling through random forums, she found a post titled Hitori Kakurenbo Experience. The doll moved on its own. And at first she laughed, obviously fake, right? But the deeper she scrolled, the faster her heart started racing. So the posts went like, I stabbed the doll and then I heard footsteps. I left the doll in the bathroom, but it turned up in my bedroom. Testimony after testimony, all different people, all the same ending. And they say what started as a joke always turned into something they couldn't explain. Aya's hands were trembling as she scrolled, but she was so curious, she couldn't look away. Could it really be true? What if I tried it myself? That thought stayed in her mind until it became a decision. The next day, she gathered everything she needed: an old stuffed doll, a bag of rice, a needle, and a red thread, a little cup of salt water, and the most unsettling piece, her own hair and clippings of her nails. And as night fell, the doll stopped feeling like a toy. It sat there on her desk, and its black plastic eyes were glinting faintly in the dark, like it was staring at her. With shaking hands, Aya slid the doll open. The cotton came spilling out, and she filled it with rice. Each grain rattled faintly as it slid inside, like tiny bones. With every sound, she felt less like she was preparing a doll, and more like she was building a body. The moment she slipped her own hair and fingernail clippings inside the doll, a chill raced up her spine. It was like ice water crawling along her bones. She thought, this doll, this is another version of me. And that thought alone made her chest tighten, like the air had grown too heavy to breathe. She threaded the needle with red string, her hands trembling, and began to stitch the doll shut. And strangely, with every pull of the thread, she felt like she heard noises, like tiny cries, faint and sharp, like the echo of someone screaming in pain. And when it was finally done, the doll didn't look the same anymore. Just minutes ago, it was just a toy. Now, it felt alive, almost as if the doll were waiting for the night to come. Aya whispered under her breath, "Am I really going to be okay?" But her hands wouldn't let go of the doll. She was already in too deep. That night, the clock crept toward 3 a.m. The lights were out, and the only glow came from the TV in the corner, its screen hissing static in black and white. The room hummed with a sound, like radio noise filling every corner, making the air feel heavy. Now it was time. With shaking hands, Aya carried the doll into the bathroom. She lowered the doll into the sink filled with water. The cold ripples lapped against its body, and its glassy black eyes disappeared beneath the surface. And for one horrible second, she felt those eyes were actually following her. And she thought, maybe I'm just being a little too jumpy right now, she thought, and she turned her head quickly, refusing to look. And when the second hand hit exactly 3 a.m., Aya bit her lip and whispered, "The first seeker is Aya." And her voice bounced off the bathroom tiles, and hearing her own name in that silence sent a shiver down her spine. Now, the game has really begun. She went back to the living room, shut her eyes tight, and began counting, lips trembling. 1, 2, 3. And by the time she reached 10, she could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She slowly forced herself back toward the bathroom, hoping it was just a silly game and nothing happened. And the moment she opened the door, she felt something was different. The air wasn't the same. It was suddenly colder and dense. The doll was still submerged in water. Now, she had to stab the doll. Aya's hand tightened around the needle she carried. Her voice cracked as she shouted, "Tomoka, I found you." The name she had chosen for the doll spilled from her lips, and she stabbed it hard in the stomach. The needle tore through the fabric with a violent rip, spilling grains of rice onto the porcelain sink. But the sound didn't just resemble tearing cloth. To her ears, for some reason, it was like a child's muffled whimper, a faint cry echoing in that small room. And in that moment, she regretted what she had done. She shouldn't have started that game. Her blood ran cold. Her heart pounded so hard. Aya dropped the needle, her hand shaking, and forced out the words, trembling. The second seeker is Tomoka. And as soon as she said it, the TV in the living room erupted, static roaring louder than before. The shadows in the hallway seemed to twist, like the house itself was moving. Aya panicked. Maybe she was just going crazy. Maybe she was losing her mind. Aya was now terrified. She grabbed the cup of salt water and bolted. And salt water, that was her last protection, the one thing that could ward off spirits. And when it came time to end the game, she had to spit it over the doll. And that was the only way to make it stop. Aya kept the salt water pressed in her mouth, just like the ritual demanded. But no matter how tightly she clung to that last line of defense, the terror didn't ease up. And in that moment, she heard a noise. She forced herself not to look back, but she could clearly hear it. It was the soft sound of footsteps, slow, heavy, something dragging across the floor, and this sound was getting closer, as if it were following right behind her. Something was really wrong. She darted into her room, slammed the door shut, and locked it. Then she crawled under her bed, curling herself into the shadows, holding her breath. And her lips stung with the bitter taste of salt water. But after a few moments, it didn't even taste like salt anymore. It was metallic, sour, like blood. Her heart pounded so loud. She pressed her hands over her chest as if she could muffle the sound. What the hell was actually happening? And then the sound came again. Thud, thud. The footsteps out in the hallway. It was the sound of slow footsteps, but it didn't sound like human footsteps. It sounded like something heavier, stickier, slapping against the floor as it moved closer. And now the TV changed too. The static wasn't just static anymore. There was a laugh buried inside it, a low, breathy laugh. And at first she thought it was in her head. Her fear was suddenly making her hear strange sounds. But whatever it was, the sound got clearer, sharper, until it sounded like it was right outside her door. It wasn't one laugh either. Sometimes it was a woman's voice, soft and mocking. Sometimes it was high-pitched, like a child, both at once, twisting together. And then the doorknob rattled. Click, 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 click. Aya's entire body froze. The metal shook so fast as if someone was twisting it, trying to get in. And the door creaked, just a fraction of an inch, enough to make every hair on her body stand on end. She clenched her jaw, desperate not to spill the salt water. She couldn't make a sound. She couldn't even breathe. Then, from inside the room, click, the light switch. The light bulb above her flared with a cold blue light, flooding the room. And for 1 second, she could see everything. And then it was suddenly off, complete darkness. And in that darkness, she heard a sound. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Something crawling, not on hands and knees. It was dragging itself on its stomach, pulling across the floor like a snake. The sound drew closer, right up to the bed. Aya covered her mouth with both hands under her bed, choking back the urge to scream. And then she saw something coming down and crawling toward her. It looked like a hand, white hand, fingers long and sharp, almost claw-like. And this hand was feeling its way blindly across the floor, reaching for her. Her heart hammered so violently she thought her chest would explode. And then the TV in the living room roared to life, a woman's voice shrieking through the static. "Found you." Aya squeezed her eyes shut, every muscle in her body trembling. The air turned icy, heavy, pressing down on her chest. She couldn't move, she couldn't breathe. All she could do was pray that the salt water would hold. Aya had no idea how much time had passed. Minutes, hours. It felt like forever. But the salt water in her mouth was burning foul, metallic, bitter. It was almost unbearable. Her throat felt dry and cracked like dirt baking in the sun. Then again, thud, thud, the sound of footsteps came back from the living room. The sound was coming closer again, until they stopped right outside her door. The doorknob slowly moved. The hinges creaked. She thought she locked the door. She did. But now the door was opening. And the door didn't swing open quickly. It slid forward inch by inch, as though something unseen was slowly pushing it. Aya froze. She dared not breathe. The footsteps were gone. But in their place came something worse, a damp, sour smell creeping into the room. And in the thin slice of light coming through the now open door, she saw it, a shadow drifting past. Her body wanted to scream, but her instincts forced her to stay still. Aya bit her lip and slowly moved her head to peek out. Then she saw it, out in the living room. There was the doll. It was sitting upright on the table, perfectly dry, as if it had never been submerged in water. The very same doll she had drowned in the bathroom sink. And now its belly, stitched together with red thread, was splitting open, grains of rice spilling across the table and onto the floor. And then its head moved slowly until its button eyes were staring directly toward the bedroom door, toward her. Even in the pitch black, those eyes gleamed like it had really found her. And from the TV came a voice, low and sharp, echoing through the static. "Not yet, Aya. It's your turn." Her stomach lurched. She swallowed hard, the salt water sloshing in her mouth, ready to spill. She crawled backward, deeper under the bed, but there was nowhere else to go. She felt like the doll's gaze was burning into her. And in that moment, she thought, I have to end this game, tears stinging her eyes. If I don't, I'm going to die here. With legs trembling so hard they barely held her weight, Aya crawled out from beneath the bed. Her whole body shook so violently she could hardly stand. Every step crunched on scattered rice grains, the sound exploding in her ears like bones breaking. And now she staggered to the doorway. The second she got out of her room, a blast of cold air slapped her face. The living room stretched before her, drenched in shadows. And there it was, the doll. The doll was sitting in the faint glow of the flickering TV. Its stomach stitches were half undone now, loose red threads dangling like veins. Its button eyes weren't just reflecting light anymore. They were glowing. Alive. And Aya's mouth filled to the brim with salt water. Her throat bulged, her lips shaking. Now, she thought, now or it's over. She had to end the game right now. She forced her legs forward, one trembling step after another, toward the table, toward the doll that was no longer a toy. Aya forced herself forward, stumbling, dragging her body closer to the doll. And then, crash! The picture frame on the wall rattled and fell, exploding into shards across the floor. The sharp sound echoed through the room, fragments scattering at her feet. Aya flinched hard, her whole body jerking back. On the TV screen, something dark flickered, a shadow darting across the static. And then, clear as a whisper in her ear, Aya, it's still your turn. Her breath caught in her throat. She almost screamed, almost spat the salt water out too soon. Her knees buckled. She felt like she was about to collapse, but somehow she pushed forward. And now the doll was waiting, sitting perfectly upright on the table, head tilted slightly, almost curious. Its button eyes still locked on hers, and at this point she was about to faint. She couldn't breathe. Her lips trembled, but she forced the words out, her voice shaking so violently it barely sounded like her own. "I win, I win, I win," she said it again and again, 3 times. Then, in one desperate rush, she spat the salt water across the doll. The water splashed over its head and stomach, soaking the red-torn stitches. The instant the droplets hit, it was like the air suddenly shifted, and that suffocating pressure just vanished. The heavy dampness lifted, rushing out like smoke. The TV blinked black, and then silence swallowed the house again. Aya collapsed, gasping for air. She was alive. She was now free. And then everything went black. She had fainted. And she had no idea how many hours passed, but when she opened her eyes, morning light was streaming in. And for a moment, she wondered, was it all just a dream? Yet her fingertips were still icy cold. And no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the memory of those eyes. Those dark, gleaming eyes that had stared straight into her soul. And from that night on, Aya never let the lights go out at 3 a.m. again. She avoided dolls, she avoided shadows, she avoided anything that reminded her of that game. Because sometimes, late at night, she still heard a voice, low, right against her ear. "Aya, it's your turn." So what do you think? Aya thought she was playing a game, but the second she started the ritual, it wasn't a game anymore. The doll became her double, and something else, something she never invited, slipped inside. So what exactly happened that night? Was Aya really hunted by her doll, or was it all just in her head? Some believe Hitori Kakurenbo is nothing less than necromancy, that by cutting the doll open, filling it with rice, and sealing it with your own DNA, you're creating a body for the dead to inhabit. Which means now you're not just playing hide and seek, you're inviting a spirit in, and you have no idea which one will answer. Others point to Japan's older curse rituals like Uji no Toki Mairi, where people nailed straw dolls to shrines to harm their enemies. Only this time, the curse is turned inward. The doll isn't just anyone, it's you, a twisted reflection that might turn against its creator. And then there are the rules. Don't break the sequence. Don't turn on the lights. Don't leave the house. Because once you've started, you've signed a contract. And if you fail to end it properly, you may never truly shut the door on what you've let in. And of course, some say it's just all in the mind. Sleep deprivation, suggestion, and the power of belief. You sit in the dark at 3 a.m., waiting, listening, and suddenly every creak of the house becomes footsteps. Every flicker of the TV becomes a signal from the other side. So maybe the ritual is nothing more than a self-fulfilling haunting. But people all over Japan have claimed the same things. TVs turning on by themselves, strange footsteps echoing through empty houses, laughter where no one's there. You could call it hallucination, maybe just the mind playing tricks. But the stories always sound the same, and that's what makes it terrifying. Why do so many people from different places tell the same story? Whether you believe it's a real ritual or just the mind playing tricks, one thing is certain. Once you play, you will never forget it. And maybe, we don't know, but the whispers Aya heard are right. Maybe it opens a door that was never meant to be opened. So, if you're curious, and if you're thinking of trying it for yourself, you have to remember this. This game is not just a midnight dare. And even if you end it the right way, the doll might not let you go. I hate dolls so much. Creepy things. And that is all for tonight's spooky story. Hope you guys liked it. And now, have a good night's sleep, turn off the lights, or maybe don't. Sweet dreams and good night, beauties. Bye-bye.